This is Sarah Squires bringing you behind the headlines in today's edition of WYO Today Newsroom. Today, I am joined by senior reporter Marit. Good morning, Marit.
Good morning, Sarah. How are you this morning?
I'm great. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're doing kind of our reporter roundtable where we're not just going to stick to one topic. We're going to kind of go over what's happening this week in the news, what we've been working on behind the scenes here. And first, I think because we are headed into the holiday season, I know, Marit, you've been covering a couple of different ways that people are really kind of gearing up and getting in the Christmas spirit. Tell us about what's going on and how we might be able to partake.
Yeah, we've got two really sort of heartwarming productions going on in Lander this week. Twin Feathers Ballet Studio is putting on a production of The Nutcracker. The kids have been hard at work for a long time getting ready, and they've got all ages from little toddlers all the way on up to teenagers who are kind of guiding the younger kids, through the ropes. And it should be just a blast. It seems like the kids have worked really, really hard to make this Christmas classic come to life and be a production to remember for the town of Lander. And then we also have the Wyoming Shakespeare Festival Company has been getting ready for the best Christmas pageant ever. Of course, the festival's founder, Diane Springford, passed away last year. And I, like a lot of folks probably, was, not sure what was going to happen with the Wyoming Shakespeare Festival Company, but Erica Deerking has them going strong. They've got a bunch of local kids and adults, and everyone is gearing up to bring on this Christmas pageant story, which should be really fun. And that's going to be at the Carnegie Room at the library. So what's going to happen this week, it's a little confusing because their dates overlap. Twin Feathers Ballet, their Nutcracker productions, will be at LVHS Wednesday and Thursday nights at 6 p.m. And then the best Christmas pageant ever will be at the Carnegie Room on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And that will start at 7 p.m. Now, you do have to pay to get into both of these, but, in both cases, this is not just money going to a business, like some random huge business. And Twin Feathers Ballet actually intends to donate the proceeds from their ticket sales to a local family in need. So good causes all around. Time to get in the Christmas spirit. Lots of happy festive things going on this week. Oh, and Sarah, before I forget, we've also got in Lander Art in the Afternoon coming up this weekend. So folks who are still waiting to start your Christmas shopping better head up to the community center and get that done over the weekend.
Definitely a lot of different Christmas things going on right now. I mean, I know we just sort of turned the corner from Thanksgiving, but, there's snow out there, guys, and people are raring to go. So definitely some fun things to take part in. And while we're talking about good causes, I wanted to bring up an issue that was kind of presented to the Riverton City Council last month that really kind of was eye-opening for me. And that is a lack of Red Cross volunteers that we have here in Fremont County. So the Riverton City Council was kind of briefed by some American Red Cross leaders and what they called an urgent need for volunteers here in Fremont County. And so one of the examples that they kind of provided was that since the beginning of the year, the organization has received 8 different fire calls from the Riverton area. And, the way they sort of put that into context was to tell us that Cheyenne, in comparison, only has about maybe 5 calls is what she estimated. So we have a really oversized need here. They kind of mentioned that this community is vulnerable to, these types of disasters, quite frankly, for families. And so over the course of those 8 calls, the Red Cross was only able to respond in person to one of them. Now, of course, there's a lot of things that the Red Cross can kind of do from afar, right? So they can provide things like financial assistance that help, people, families get into a, hotel room, for instance, if they need somewhere to stay after losing their home to a fire, get, the basic clothing, toothbrush, those kinds of things, necessities. But there are a lot of things that they can't do from afar. And that, can span from, comforting a family, showing up with blankets when they're out there in the cold, watching, their kind of life go up in flames, a stuffed animal for children who are watching, their home be destroyed, and just kind of that sense of knowing that someone is really there for them. And then, of course, we're sort of overlooking the need for volunteers in the event of a much more kind of wide-reaching type of disaster. So the American Red Cross obviously is an organization that responds to disasters, and they really know what's going on. They've got their business in order. They know how to respond, to a variety of different kinds of events. But what they really need here in Fremont County are some volunteers to assist here on the ground. And it's pretty easy. It sounds like all you need to do is go online to redcross.org, and you can just right then and there sign up to do some trainings. So you can do those virtually, you can do them online, you learn a thing or two, and then you get added to their volunteer pool. So then what happens is, it's not a huge burden. If something happens in your area, you'll receive a text message or some kind of outreach from Red Cross, and you can just let them know, hey, I'm here. I can come down and help. I can do whatever's needed. Or, hey, I'm out of town, or I'm not available. It's really up to you. So it's very simple to sign up and really kind of generate this pool of volunteers that are so needed here in Fremont County. So I really just want to encourage everyone to check it out. Visit redcross.org/volunteer, and you will find all that you need to get connected to those resources. And, I think the organization is also kind of working on some emergency preparedness planning here for our region, which we don't really have, especially for the city of Riverton in particular. So they're trying to kind of map out resources and just sort of kind of plan for how to mitigate things when disaster strikes. So that is an opportunity, I think, for everyone to, in this season of giving, to think of ways that we can give back. You don't have to have real deep pockets to just say, hey, I am able to help. I want to, figure out what I can do to join this team. So that is something that I really wanted to highlight for folks, because I thought it was a very interesting topic, especially knowing that we do get more fire calls in this area for household fires than a lot of places. So definitely something for folks to check out.
Yeah. And, Sarah, you're talking about that, and it makes me think, our volunteer fire departments, which, all of our fire departments here are volunteer, work so hard. And they do a great job, but, the disaster doesn't end for the family once the fire's out, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it seems like a great way for folks to get involved. If obviously firefighting is really important, but not everyone, for one reason or another, has the capability to volunteer as a firefighter. This sounds like something people can do if they want to help, but maybe firefighting isn't for them.
Absolutely. And what a cool team to be part of, I think, too. You through those trainings, you learn skills that you can carry with you in your everyday life. You never know when you're going to need to be, ready and able to respond to some kind of disaster out there. So definitely something for folks to check out. Now, I wanted to bring up some reporting that you had been working on here, Marit, that has to do with tax exemptions. And it sounds like there's some court action, and now we've got the legislature taking this up. What's going on, Marit, with property tax exemptions in Wyoming?
Yeah. So I'm specifically looking here at tax exemptions for governments and government land. So, I think a lot of folks heard about the property tax proposed bills that swept through the Revenue Committee recently, but maybe a little more under the radar. The Revenue Committee was also taking a look at, in the Wyoming State Constitution, it says that government property that is used for a governmental purpose is exempt from property taxes. But there's a real question mark around what governmental purpose means and what it applies to. So last year in Uinta, there was this gas station that's situated on land that is to benefit the Wyoming State Hospital, which, we all can probably agree that hospitals are helpful and help people and do serve a governmental purpose. But this land with the gas station, everyone sort of agreed the gas station itself is an improvement that is subject to taxes. But the question was, is the land underneath the gas station serving a governmental purpose because the gas station is paying its lease to, the Wyoming State Hospital, and that money is benefiting the hospital? Well, they went all the way to the Wyoming Supreme Court, and the Wyoming Supreme Court said, no, it's a private business. That's not a governmental purpose. They owe property taxes on the land. And so, that created some question marks around, well, how is the state legislature defining governmental purpose? How is this being applied across the state? How do we kind of create something a little more uniform that everyone can look to and understand the same way? So the Revenue Committee is working on this. Last legislative session, so earlier this year, there was a piece of legislation passed that added in a little clarity around state lands in particular, but part of that legislation that says that state lands have some exemptions is going to sunset at the start of 2027. So that means we've got, just this one legislative session to hammer some stuff out and figure out, what does governmental purpose mean? Can the legislature get a definition passed that everyone can kind of agree on and apply when they're assessing property taxes or not assessing property taxes for these pieces of land?
Yeah. Things get, a bit complicated when you've got, government-owned land or public land that has private development on it. So that'll be a very interesting one to watch. And of course, we know that this year's legislative session doesn't start until early February, but things are really heating up. Right now, there's one kind of set of bills that we've been keeping an eye on that have to do with the gambling, gaming industry here in Wyoming. Of course, there are a lot of opinions out there about what kind of oversight we should be, applying to these industries. And the Management Council, the Legislative Management Council, earlier last month forwarded or kind of advance some legislation that oversees some different forms of gambling. One of them has to do with making money laundering a felony on its own, which, I kind of assumed maybe that was already the case, but it's not. And so we've got a bill coming out that really kind of more clearly defines what money laundering really is under state law. And currently it sounds like it's been kind of a complicated enforcement situation when you've got large amounts of cash that are tied to gambling. But this is a pretty straightforward standalone bill that is hopefully going to straighten that out for folks. They also advanced a proposal that gives cities and counties clear authority to sign off on simulcasting sites. That is where, of course, off-track horse racing betting takes place. So the bill keeps in place this 100-mile restriction, which prevents simulcasting operations from operating within 100 miles of a live track unless the track operator consents to those existing there. We've got another proposal out there that has to do with these skill-based amusement things. They're called, sometimes called cowboy skill machines. And the issue came up after earlier this year, state regulators found that there were some minors that were playing these games in a grocery store in Rock Springs. And so that prompted lawmakers to say, hold on, wait a minute, I think we need to figure out what's going on. So what they did was restrict those types of gambling games to businesses that have liquor license and allow kind of on-premise consumption. So you're talking about, bars and bar restaurants and that type of thing. So hopefully that will kind of put a stop to, situations where you might have minors, getting access to such skill-based gambling setups. So those are a list of bills that have to do with the gaming sector, but we've got kind of right now is when so much work that these legislative committees have been up to is all sort of, coming together, and they are advancing and advancing and advancing as we look ahead to February's legislative session. But what we've got going on this week, in fact, I think right now, Governor Gordon is addressing the legislature's Joint Appropriations Committee and sort of giving his recommended budget for this upcoming 2027-2028 biennium. What's happening, this is sort of the very beginning of a several weeks of the Joint Appropriations Committee hearing and reviewing state agency budget requests. So those are all of this action is being streamed on the legislature's YouTube channel. The hearings take place, they're open to the public. They're through this week, next week, January 5th to the 9th, and January 12th to the 16th. So over the course of these hearings, every state agency, so think, Game and Fish, the DEQ, those guys, they are approaching the Joint Appropriations Committee. They're presenting kind of their requests for this biennial budget. And then they take questions from the committee. And then after all of this work is complete, the Joint Appropriations Committee basically works on these budgets, and they say, okay, where can we cut? Where can we, where do we need to, prioritize that kind of thing? And they either approve, deny, or modify each of these state agency, board, and commission requests. Now, once they finish that work, the General Appropriations Bill, which is kind of coined the budget bill, is made available for those of us here back at home to kind of take a look at, and we can provide our feedback. And then they go into what's called the budget session, which starts on February 9th. So there is a lot of work going on. I think a lot of people sort of think that all of the action for the state legislature sort of happens during the committee, but no, folks, if that's the first time you tune in, you have missed a lot of the work, a lot of the research that goes into especially a budget year. These are a lot of numbers that are being crunched here. There's a very strong will, I think, at our legislature here to sort of pull back and be frugal as possible here, and really take a look at where we can come up with some savings. So now is a really interesting time, I think, to keep an eye on what's going on in Cheyenne. And, if you've got a particular agency or, a topic that you're interested in, now is a great time to reach out to state legislators and let them know what you're thinking.
Yeah. Now, Sarah, I've got one last piece of news for you that kind of ties everything back to where we started. So, I was thumbing through my inbox here, and I saw a report that, Rudolph has been putting his team through their paces to get ready for the big night on Christmas Eve. So, folks, if you happen to see some reindeer hooves in your front lawn, don't worry too much. It's just them training for the big day.
Oh, yes, definitely, guys. There will be signs. There are always signs. We know that Santa and his crew have really favored Fremont County over the last few years. They've made some stops and gone on some adventures. And so, absolutely keep an eye out for what Santa, his elves, and his reindeer are up to this year. I wanted to thank you, Marit, so much for joining me for this reporter roundtable where we're taking folks kind of behind the headlines, behind the scenes, let them know what we're working on here in the newsroom, and give you that kind of extra insight into what's going on in Wyoming. So thank you, Marit.
Thanks, Sarah.